How are you? I feel bad now. You're the only one who's going to be standing. Are you okay? Good? Well, good afternoon. I want to thank you all for being here and joining us today. In addition to being joined by the Secretary of the Department of Health, Kim Malsdam-Risden, we also have Dr. Josh Clayton, who is the South Dakota State Epidemiologist. We also have Dr. Brad Archer, who's the Chief Medical Officer from Monument Health. He's on the end. Then we have Dr. David Basil, Pediatrics and Internal Medicine from Avera is with us as well. Thank you for being here. And Dr. Allison Suttle, who's the Chief Medical Officer at Sanford Health. Yesterday, I told you all that we would visit about science and the data and the facts about what is guiding us to make decisions here in the state of South Dakota. And we want to show you some information and some numbers that everyone here has agreed on is a plan for South Dakota about how we will get through the next several months dealing with COVID-19 virus in our state to best take care of the people that live here. This has already been a many weeks long effort. I'm thankful for the Department of Health team that has just put incredible work into this for literally months already. Remember that Kim's team started working on this back in January. I'm going to put up a slide that has a time frame of everything that has been happening since January so people have some background on how we arrived at where we are today. Back in January, Kim's team and the Department of Health started monitoring the situation. That's when I started to get my weekly updates from them on the spread of this virus in other parts of the world. The Department of Health has had planning meetings ever since January 22nd. We launched the covid.sd.gov website on January 27th. That is the first day that that website went live that you all look at so much now today to get up-to-date information. We activated our internal emergency operations center on February 10th. We've started putting individuals from different departments and agencies into the Emergency Operations Center to start getting ready and preparing for the future. We briefed the legislature on March 7th on the situation as it was unrolling across the country and coming here in South Dakota, and our first positive cases were announced on March 10th. Now, from day one, we've been monitoring the situation on the ground here in South Dakota. We've let the facts and the data and the science of this virus drive our decision making. On March 13th, I declared a state of emergency in South Dakota and announced several different mitigation efforts that we would undertake to make sure we were slowing down the spread. We postponed big athletic events in the state of South Dakota. We worked with different businesses to innovate how they were operating and how they were taking care of their customers and their employees. And I issued work-at-home stay orders for our state employees and other businesses in the state. I took those steps because our projections and the numbers that we were seeing that could happen here in South Dakota were very concerning for us. Now, since that time, Kim and Dr. Clayton and others at the Department of Health have been refining those projections. These great folks from Avera and from Sanford and from Monument have been incredibly helpful to us, and they've come on board to help develop a plan and projections for our state. Most importantly, though, what I appreciate is that the people of South Dakota have taken this seriously. They, when asked, have stepped up to the challenge and have done exactly what we have asked them to do to protect their families and to make sure we're in a good position to deal for this virus going across the state. So today, we're looking at a very different picture. Before I dive into those details, I just want to offer up a couple of caveats for you to keep in mind as we look at all the numbers and the charts and the graphs that I'm going to show you, is that we are in a very fluid situation. We are dealing with a virus, which is unpredictable, and we're still learning more about each and every day. Our projections that we're going to give you today, they're dynamic. They're not static. They will change. They will change as the virus spreads, and they will change based on developments in medicine, therapeutics, or other factors that maybe today we don't even anticipate. The data has been helping us to prepare for our peak time, and our peak time is when we will have the most people in the state infected with the virus at one time. And it has helped and is helping our healthcare systems to prepare to take care of individuals so that people have the best chance to get over this virus as possible. And as I've said all along, we need to make our decisions based on those factors, not on emotions or how we're feeling that day, but based on really what we know and the facts that we're dealing with here in the state of South Dakota. Now, the numbers that I will give you and the projections are all information that the state and these three health systems have agreed on is the best plan for the state of South Dakota, the best path forward, and the data and the information that went into what I'm going to show you today. And I wanted to have this information available to every single South Dakotan. This is a very honest, palms up conversation with you about what's in our future and how we need your help to make sure that this plan that we have in front of us will be successful. Remember, 80% of the people in this state that get the virus will show no symptoms at all or very mild symptoms. And the reason that we seek to flatten the curve is so that we can slow down the spread of the virus and adequately take care of those individuals that may need health care along the way. We need to slow it down so that we have the capacity to give them hospital beds, ICU care, ventilators, whatever they may need to heal, to be well, and to continue on enjoying their families and their life here in South Dakota. So on March 10th, this is the graph that I want to show you of what we were looking at for information that we would have for peak infections here in the state of South Dakota. Now, significant hospitalizations, when you look at that graph with the information that we had in front of us, we could not take care of the people that would get sick and would need to be hospitalized. It was far beyond our capacity and far beyond what we would be able to do in the state of South Dakota. So what we did is we went forward and put in some mitigation measures. We limited sizes of people that could spend time together, asked people to stay home, focused on washing hands, having good hygiene, changing business practices. And thanks to that, thanks to all of you and smart South Dakotans, here's what we're looking at now. Now we have cut the number of people at our peak infection rate that will be sick at one time almost in half, which is fantastic. But if you will notice by looking at these charts, what's different is that we have pushed our peak infection date out, which means we still have a long road in front of us. We will not, according to these charts and this data and information that we have, reach our peak until we get to the middle of June, end of June. And that is the peak. That is not when we are through this thing. That just means that is when the most people will be sick, and we will still have to keep all of our mitigation measures in place until we get to August. So if you look at that graph and you see that time frame, when I ask you to do something to help protect people and keep them safe, I'm looking at the fact that I need to ask you to maintain those behaviors and to live that lifestyle until we get to August. That is based on what we've already implemented here at the state of South Dakota. And it is working. What you're doing is definitely bending the curve. It is flattening the curve. It is slowing down the spread. And it's giving us the ability to go forward and to make sure that we have the capacity in our healthcare systems to take care of individuals who will need hospitalization or physician's care to get better. We also have a projection slide I want to put up for you that says real numbers. These are the projections for South Dakota. Our South Dakota population is 882,235 people. That's how many people live here today. At our peak infection rate, which will be mid-June, towards the end of June, we will have current containment and social distancing mitigation measures in place. That means doing what we're doing today is when we will reach that peak infection rate, and this is when we are still continuing the activities that we've been doing the last couple of weeks. Now, this is a number that's been a little different. What I have told you before is that people that will get the virus in South Dakota would be about 30% of the population. What we've learned about the virus since I first talked to you about that percentage is that now we understand that many more people could be infected with the virus that have no symptoms whatsoever. So now we're talking 30 to 70% of our population realistically will get this virus. That's what we need to prepare for. Now, it shouldn't be too scary for us because we recognize those other folks that we're encompassing will contract the virus, but they will have no symptoms or very mild symptoms where it won't occur to them that they have COVID-19. But when we're looking at our data and our numbers and the amount of people that will get infected, we anticipate it will be 265,000 people to 600,000 people in the state of South Dakota. What this means, taking into the formula of what we've seen in other states and across the world, with that many people that will have the virus and that will contract it, and then laying it on top of our demographic information, where our elderly population lives, individuals who have pre-existing health conditions, that we will need at our peak infection date, sometime in the middle of June, that we will need about 5,000 hospital beds dedicated to COVID-19. We will also need 1,300 ventilators to take care of the people in our state that will need them. This means that 5% of the infections will be hospitalized, which is a number that many of the other models are using that you've heard about on the national news. And we believe that 26% of those that are hospitalized, which is a common formula that's put into place, will need a ventilator. And this is the plan that we are preparing for with our healthcare systems. We are planning to add and to utilize what we currently have. We need to have the capacity to have 5,000 COVID-19 positive patients in the hospital at our peak date. And we need to have 1,300 ventilators available to take care of individuals that may need them at that date. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't continue to have people in the hospital. We will have people in the hospital with COVID-19 long after that. But just know that this is the plan that we all have spent many hours working on, laying out and agreeing to, and today are here showing you, the public and the people of South Dakota, so that you can join with us in getting behind this plan and making sure that we have the best chance at success as protecting as many people as possible in our state as we go forward. Now, I want to talk about sustainability, because I get a lot of questions from folks about why I don't just issue a shelter at home projection, why I don't close the borders of South Dakota, why I don't shut down every single business in our state. I want you to know that if I were to put in place those measures, we need to be able to sustain them. And what that means is that if I put those measures in place, you need to be able to do that until October. The end of October is the date that you would need to do that in order to make sure we got through our COVID-19 virus spread through the state of South Dakota. The reason is the longer you put in mitigation measures, the more you do flatten that curve and bring down the number of people that will be hospitalized at one time, but it also pushes the date out. So this has been a constant balance and analysis that we've been looking at and analyzing, is how long can people change their way of life? How long can they stay at home? How long can children stay out of school? How long before we don't have any businesses left to employ people and help them put food on their tables? How long can we keep people out of South Dakota or not let any South Dakotans leave our state? If I put all those measures into place today, I want to be real honest and candid with you that means you would have to sustain that activity and shelter at home and not leave and not have our businesses open and have our borders closed until October. So know that the more mitigation measures we put into place, the longer it will take for us to get through this current situation that we have. So the plan today is the ones that reflect the chart I have in front of you. It gives us the capacity to take care of individuals. It makes sure that we will have health care and doctors and nurses and the equipment that we need to help people. It is a very serious situation. A lot of people will have mild to no symptoms, but there are people that will get very sick, and there are people that will not get better. But we are going to do all that we can to help every single South Dakotan and their families get through this difficult situation and make sure that it is a plan that we can follow through on, that we will complete, and that will help us come out on the other side. We need to be really realistic about what's in front of us. And so I've invited Dr. Josh Clayton, our state epidemiologist, to be here today to dive a little deeper into some of the projections that we have. A lot of people are using the word modeling. We've used all the modeling available to us to put together our projections and how it relates to the state of South Dakota and how we'll move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Josh Clayton.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor. The consensus projections that were denoted in blue is based on information that was available as of April 2nd and is subject to change as new data becomes available. Each model that is listed on the slide that I'll be showing here in a moment has its own limitations. We evaluated several and realized that due to all of those limitations, we wanted to really take a consensus approach and work with our healthcare partners and health systems to identify what is the best course of action for surge capacity planning for hospital beds in the state. So on the screens are just a few of the models that we have considered. The Harvard model does include total hospitalizations, but it does not account for the timing in which those hospitalizations occur, and there are no projections for ventilators needed in the state. The University of Washington model, we're unsure the exact R naught or the doubling time that is used in some of the projections that have been posted. And it does, according to some of the basic assumptions, require a stay-at-home order for the populations that are there for several months. The COVID Act Now model does not fully take into account what actions may have already occurred to decrease the R naught or the doubling time. And there also have no projections for ventilators that would be needed in the state. The Penn Medicine model does have information in there, and their default values may underrepresent or underreport the total hospital beds and ICU beds and ventilator beds needed. The University of Columbia model currently is focused at that national level and is not designed for state-by-state projections. So the information from that model that was presented is the peak being in mid-June with about 5,000 total hospital beds at the peak and a 1,300 ventilators needed to help support the planning that we're doing for the state of South Dakota.
That's great. Thank you, Josh. I'm going to go to each of our doctors who will make a statement too and give a few thoughts. So let's go first to Dr. Brad Archer, who's the Chief Medical Officer at Monument Health. Dr. Archer.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you, Josh, for the opportunity to collaborate during these challenging times on this particularly confusing topic of predicting the course and impact of this virus. We at Monument Health endorse this model, and we appreciate the opportunity to have our predictive analytics team engage with each of you as we came to this conclusion. The use of these models, their utility really is primarily in building out our capacity plans and also to look ahead to make sure that we have the supplies that we need to deal with this. Those have been the primary efforts that we've been engaged in for the last several weeks. We've redesigned really our entire organizational structure to do just that. We've had great interaction with our local elected officials as well as other community agencies, including health care providers, as well as our engineering community that has stepped up to help us with manufacturing and recycle and reuse options. So we appreciate the opportunity and hope to continue this collaboration across the state.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Archer. Let's go to Dr. David Basel, Pediatrics and Internal Medicine at Avera.
Thank you. On behalf of Avera, I'd first like to start by thanking you, Governor, Secretary, and Dr. Clayton for bringing us all together to have open dialogue and discernment in this process. What a state that we live in, that there are not very many states where all of the major players can come together with this degree of dialogue that we've had in these last couple of weeks to come to these projections, which Avera also fully supports. The thing that has really reached me during this process, and you showed that in that first graph that you showed, the difference that every individual resident in this state is going to have. We do not have a vaccine for this virus. We do not have an antiviral treatment for this virus. What we have to fight this virus is each and every resident. The difference between each resident infecting 2 other people versus 2.5 other people means the difference between the healthcare systems being able to handle this load or being overwhelmed by this load. And so the power really is in the people's hands, staying home. If you have any hint of illness, not being around other people, that social distancing will determine whether we win or lose this fight.
That's very good. Appreciate that. Dr. Allison Settle, Chief Medical Officer at Sanford Health.
Thank you, Governor. I would also like to reiterate my sincere thanks to the Governor, the Secretary, and Dr. Clayton. It has been a collaborative effort, and it has been wonderful to see all of the systems come together and with the state to come up with one story that we can tell South Dakota, and that we can all now shoulder to shoulder prepare and get our arms around so that we can take care of every single resident and every single patient that comes to our doors. So it's been fantastic, and I really do appreciate those efforts. Next, I would like to say thank you to every single one of you in the state of South Dakota who has done your part to social distance. I have physicians and nurses that are coming to work every day, and they're given time to prepare, time to plan, and time to get the supplies we need and get the medications that we need so that we can take care of patients. And so thank you on behalf of every single physician and nurse that works at Sanford for staying home and doing your part. We are getting ready. We're getting ready every day with supplies, with upskilling nurses that work in the clinic so that they can begin to work in the hospital, developing a rapid lab test with a 90-minute turnaround time so that we can be more and more ready as these cases increase. And the modeling really helps us, as Dr. Archer said, it helps us plan how many of the different things we're going to need, when are we going to need these things so that we can be completely prepared. It is just a model and it will change, and it depends on all of our behaviors and the virus itself and the biology of the virus, which we have to respect. I think now more than ever is the time to double down on staying at home. The case numbers are rising, so that staying at home is even more critical. And I'll give you just a few very specific examples of what I mean by staying at home. One of my neighbors said, this isn't social distancing, it's physical distancing. He's got a couple teenagers in his house. So it is exactly that. It's staying physically apart from each other. And so when you go to the grocery store, don't go every other day or every few days. Really plan out your meals for the next week or 10 days, your snacks, everything that you're going to need from toiletry items so that you go to the store once and that you can get done. The more times you go out of your house, the more times there are for exposure or for transmitting the virus. I think another thing is having guests in your home. I would love to have my parents come over. They live in the same Sioux Falls, the same town as I do, but we're not doing that. We're really staying apart from each other. So we're doing FaceTime meals together. We're doing other things where we're physically apart, but we're socially together. It's so important. Even going outdoors. I've seen a lot of people enjoying the parks, getting out and walking. Even then, I don't think you want to be going out for walks with the groups of your neighbors, because standing right next to each other as you're walking for that half an hour, that's in close contact and close proximity. So really concentrate on that physical distancing, staying far apart from each other, and that's going to help prevent that spread of the virus. It will get worse before it gets better, but everyone has a part to play, and everyone can do their part. Please stay home and stay safe, and that will allow for our healthcare providers to do their job. It's a really challenging time as a society, and we will all be tested. I've been inspired by staff members at our facilities that have raised their hand and said, what can I do? I'm not a clinical person, but I'll suit up. You tell me where you need me to go. And we've seen that in our communities too, all sorts of volunteerism and wanting to help out. And that is so inspiring and so appreciated. And really that's what we do as South Dakotans. So now more than ever, the biggest way that you can help our health systems is to stay at home and to stay physically apart. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Settle. Again, all the charts and the information that we've shared with you will be available on the covid.sd.gov website. I will be emailing, or Maggie will, emailing all this information to all of the press as well. So you will have that. You'll have the charts available to you to look at and to ask follow-up questions on. I just so appreciate these healthcare providers, these experts, these doctors. They have given us hours and hours of their time, their knowledge, their expertise to put into this plan for the state of South Dakota. They've made themselves available 24 hours a day to our Department of Health, to Kim, and to me personally, and it has just meant the world to us. So again, I just want to make sure that we're sending a clear message to the people of South Dakota. When I first started learning about this virus and the impact it would have on our state, the amount of people that would become infected and how quickly they were was going to crash our healthcare system, and we wouldn't have been able to take care of individuals. Because of what the people of South Dakota have done, the fact that they did exactly what I asked them to do by staying apart, staying home, washing their hands, limiting group size, it is working. It is working. We have cut the number of people on our peak infection date in half. We are now at the point where we have a plan we can follow through on and that we all agree we can provide health care for. But I need you to continue to sustain these activities. We will reach our peak infection date by our projections today, which are fluid, by the middle of June, the end of June. But remember, we will have to sustain our current activities today through August. And so I'm asking you to join hands with us, link arms, and be willing to complete this plan to make sure that we have the ability to care for everybody who lives here and be an example of what it takes when people accept the personal responsibility that they have in this and are willing to make sacrifices on behalf of their communities and their people that live here in our state. I think one of the points that I believe it was Dr. Basel put forward was when he talked about your impact on the infection rate, is you may have and test positive for COVID-19 today and not know it. Your ability to stay home, and if you are positive, and if you keep from infecting just one more person, that has a huge impact on our healthcare systems as they try to care for individuals that may need it. If you will make sure that you're not going to infect or spread the virus around, that helps us make sure we're better prepared to handle whatever is coming our direction. So thank you for being willing to do this for us and working with us. And I just so appreciate all the work that this team has put in. One thing I did want to touch on is that we have some really great news that is encouraging, and I wanted to end on an encouraging note before we took questions about Beetle County. I think most of us know that Beetle and the city of Huron has been dealing with, infections and with one loss of life in that area as well. But they have had a total of, I believe, 21 positive COVID-19 tests in that county. 17 of them have fully recovered. And while they had some significant challenges, this community of Beetle County and Huron took it seriously. Their mayor has been absolutely fantastic. He has been on the phone with me. He called me immediately. We talked through mitigation measures they could put in place, what they could do. They did that, and they went from having 21 positive cases is the total amount of cases that they've had in that community, one loss of life, but now they have 17 fully recovered individuals going forward. And I think that that just is a testimony to what a community can do to really make sure they're making the right decisions to come out ahead of this thing and take care of the individuals who live there. So with that, let's open it up to any questions that you may have. And if you have a specific question for an individual on the panel here, just go ahead and direct your question there, and that'll be great.
Thank you. With that, let's open it up to any questions.
Governor, no. Lee Strubinger with South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
Okay, Lee, I'm going to come to you in a minute. I've got another question in the room. The question in the room was, do we have 5,000 extra hospital beds today to handle the COVID-19 positive patients? And do we have 1,300 ventilators? We do not, but we have a plan to get there. And we will get there by the time we reach our peak infection date in June. So we do not have those currently today, but we do have a plan that we've all agreed on to how we will respond and get that capacity in place before it's needed. And I do want to ask anybody who's on the phone that if you do not have your phone muted, please mute it now. That will be helpful in hearing the questions, and it'll be helpful in them getting the response back that they need as well. So please mute your phone until you ask your question, and then mute it again right away so we can have a clear connection. Let's go to Lee. Lee, did you have a question on the phone?
Yeah, thank you, Governor. You talked about if the mitigation efforts were put in place, how they would extend the peak cases into October. Can you talk a little bit? Can you unpack that a little bit for us? Because later on we were talking about staying at home and that being like the best thing for people to do. So how does that extend it out to October?
So, Lee, I believe your question was, sorry, we had somebody talking on top of you the whole time as well. So again, I want to just remind everybody to please mute your phones and mute whatever's in the background so we can hear the questions and answer them properly. I think you talked about mitigation efforts. And so we did projections into the future on if we issued a stay-at-home order at the state of South Dakota and told everybody to stay in their homes, or for instance, if we close the borders, if we put actions in place to close all businesses except essential businesses, what would that mean? That would mean that we would potentially have less people infected severely at one time. It would lower our peak infection rate and the population numbers, but it also pushes out the date to which we would need to sustain those activities to make sure that we're getting through the virus time period it'll spend here in South Dakota. So by doing that, when you flatten that curve, you make it last longer. You don't eliminate the virus doesn't go away. And I shared yesterday at the press conference that more than likely we could potentially see two peaks. This viruses tend to come and peak and disappear and then come back in the fall, and we need to be prepared for that as well, that we could see another round come through. We may not, but typically when you come to these type of pandemic situations with viruses, we do see that. But if we do put in severe mitigation actions such as shelter at home, that will slow down the spread of the virus, but that also means that we need to continue to sustain those activities for longer periods of time, which means by our projections today, it would be through October.
Mitigation.
Do you have a follow-up, Lee?
That will slow down the spread of the virus.
Not at this time. Well, what's your message to municipalities, like neighboring municipalities that have shut things down, but say something like, in the case of Rapid City, they've kind of shut businesses and restaurants or bars and restaurants, but maybe a neighboring community hasn't. I guess what's your message maybe to some of those neighboring communities or communities that are kind of dealing with that?
Well, I have always said that every community has the opportunity to make decisions that they think is best for their people. They just need to sustain those as well to make sure that they're getting through the virus situation. So what necessarily is a decision at a community level isn't going to work from border to border across the state of South Dakota. So what I have said is that I think we have very different situations throughout our state. The best decision for Sioux Falls, South Dakota isn't going to be the best decision for Webster, South Dakota, or for Midland, South Dakota. And so that's why I've given guidelines, followed CDC guidance, given an executive order to put direction and guidance out there, but also told local leaders that if they feel as though they need to go above and beyond that, they certainly have the prerogative and the desire to do that. They can take that type of action. I can have Kim speak to that.
Thank you for that question. We have the surge capacity identified right now with our hospitals doing that planning at about 4,400 beds. That will require additional staff and equipment, and so we're working on those details and working to be able to help address those needs. We are also in the process of identifying additional alternative care sites that could be used to help once we get to that peak need. The number of ventilators in our state is currently at about 525. That includes both ventilators and related equipment that is currently available in hospital settings, as well as what we have available in our state cache. We have requests into FEMA as well as private suppliers to help bridge the gap of ventilator needs.
And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important that we've come up with this plan and projected out what our needs will be long before we get to our peak infection date. So we have some time, but we are aggressively going after and securing those resources that we will need.
I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important.
States are going to get them if they don't really need them.
Is there any further questions?
Governor, this is Stephen from the
Stephen, go ahead.
With your projection, and as you said, the number of infections would be higher if you had not issued a stay-at-home order. Does that also mean the death toll from this will be higher? And what's your calculation as far as the trade-off for that?
Well, Stephen, I think I understand your question. At one point, if we had done no change in behavior in the state of South Dakota, we would have gotten so many people infected and needing health care at one time, we would not be able to take care of them. So the goal was to look at different projections of what was happening around the world, what was happening in different parts of the country, and then apply South Dakota's demographics, our age ranges, take into consideration people that had pre-existing healthcare conditions, which made them more vulnerable to catching this virus, and then looking at our healthcare capacity in the state, seeing what we could achieve, what would give us a plan that we could sustain, that the people of South Dakota would wrap their arms around and help us get through this situation the best we can. So by changing some of our behaviors and by the people of South Dakota taking it so seriously, that original peak has been cut in half. Now we've pushed it farther out into the future. It will be in June, probably about the middle of June, maybe the third week of June, around in there somewhere from our projections today. But we have cut the number of people that will need hospitalization and resources in half. And that is something that everyone at this table that's participating here has agreed to we can achieve, that we have a realistic plan that we can put more capacity in hospital beds, that we can get the ventilators that we need, and that we have the ability to staff it to get through that peak infection time period. That is what we've been looking for and spending time doing an analysis on, and that is achievable for our state.
Sorry, maybe my question wasn't very clear. You had said that if you had issued stay-at-home orders, that would decrease the number of infections, but also push out the peak date to what you felt like was not a sustainable date. But would that also decrease the number of deaths from this?
So this is Dr. Josh Clayton. What we're looking at and what the focus is on is the hospital bed capacity. So we do know that, our current model projections do show that, yes, we have had an impact in decreasing the overall bed surge capacity that we would need to help care for those COVID-19 patients. So our current model projections do put it out to that second week in June. If we do have more austere measures, the stay-at-home order and other measures that some other states are using, that does also push out the peak further. It does decrease that peak overall, and it would have the same impact as it has for hospital beds to any deaths that we would see from COVID-19.
Patrick? Yes, the question is if we currently stay where we are today, if we follow the mitigation measures we have in place, if we stay at home, keep groups and populations less than 10 people in one place at one time, if we continue to be diligent about washing our hands, social distancing, staying 6 feet away from each other, and be responsible about achieving that, then yes, we should reach our peak infection date in June, but we cannot stop doing that until August. We need to continue to ride out that peak and make sure we're keeping all of those pieces of the puzzle in place until we get through August in order to follow the plan that we've laid out for you today. More than likely, yes. We have closed down schools. I have through May 1st. I believe that we'll be reevaluating and putting out more guidance to school districts this coming week based on what we know on this plan. And we'll be looking at how we get through August and to know what will happen this fall.
May 1st.
Yes, we are. The question is are we taking into account Indian Health Service capacity, even Veterans Affairs, and the VA has some capacity. So yes, we've done an analysis of all of those medical facilities and what resources they can bring to the table too in meeting the needs that South Dakota will have. And we have several other smaller independent hospitals and clinics that we've identified and will keep a part of the plan as well. Other questions?
This is Jackie with SDPB.
Yes, Jackie, go ahead.
I'm wondering what your projections are showing for anticipated death tolls at this time.
This is Kim Malsom-Risden. Again, I just want to reiterate what the governor and Dr. Clayton and all the folks here today have discussed, and that is we're really focusing on what projections do we need to be able to have an adequate hospital capacity to deal with COVID-19. We've talked in the past about various percentages of deaths associated with COVID-19, and that ranges from 0.5 to 3% of positive cases.
And we're not going to give you a specific number. I guess there's no way for us to know that. We don't know what could change in the next day, the next week, the next month. We're certainly hoping that therapeutics will come online, that we'll have the ability to have something that works to help patients recover better and quicker and faster. And so that's all things that I know is aggressively being pursued at the national level and that we'll continue to look at and consider as well. So this is the plan that we have to move forward with today based on the data and the science of what we know of this virus today. And we will continue to pursue that to take care of the people of South Dakota. Dr. Clayton, do you want to speak to that?
The overall focus has been kind of on that bed capacity, but the curve for the number of people that would typically end up infected does follow that same overall curve for hospital beds. It's very highly variable. So we don't necessarily have the overall number of individuals that would be infected on a single day as an example. A little bit of that is due to an individual having a variability in terms of after they have been exposed to the virus, how long from that time of exposure to the time when they do develop illness. We know that the time varies from about 2 days to about 14 days. That middle number where most people do develop illness is about 5 days after they have been exposed to someone infected with the COVID-19 virus. But that's not something that we've actively modeled with this. Our main focus has been on the hospital bed capacity.
Illness is about 5 days after they have been exposed.
Further questions?
Someone is infected with the COVID-19 virus.
We've got one in the room, and then we'll take the one that's on the phone.
So the projections are mainly focused on the population in total. The essential impact on population density and how many contacts that a person would have in a given week is kind of taken into account in some of the social distancing or the decrease of the R naught value, which is the number of people that you would typically come into contact with and could potentially infect with the COVID-19 virus. While it's not directly incorporated into the model, there are some ways that we have looked at that and overall looking at how many contacts that a person has, and that would be different in a rural area than in an urban area.
Incorporated into the model.
But it certainly underlies the importance of why we have a South Dakota plan, and we don't follow the same plan that a much more populated state would follow, because our population density is much different than an area such as New Jersey or Louisiana or somewhere like that. So we took into account our population density and then are looking specifically county by county to identify individuals that we know of are elderly in that county, how many in that county have health conditions already that would make them more vulnerable, and making sure that we're putting resources close by and nearby where we can care for them and be prepared for if they were to become infected and have complications, how we would get them taken care of. So that analysis and planning by the Department of Health in conjunctions with our healthcare providers is incredibly important in this plan as well. Okay, we had a question on the phone line.
Complications, how we would get them taken.
Just looking ahead for if you're considering these restrictions taking place through August, are you discouraging people from coming here, visiting into South Dakota through that period as well?
We have all kinds of conversations going forward, and each of our agencies and departments are coming up with plans for how they will operate in the coming months and how they will continue to do their due diligence. I know our Department of Tourism is having conversations about what life looks like and what their advertising plans look like in light of this virus, and they will continue to communicate that as well. But we do not have any current plans to encourage people to come to South Dakota and visit us. We want to make sure we're taking care of the people of our state and that we are slowing down the spread, and all of our actions will back that plan up.
As well, but we do not have any.
This is Trevor Mitchell with the Argus Leader.
Yes, Trevor, go ahead.
We want to make sure.
So I guess I'm wondering, when you're talking about not sharing a number of projected deaths because it's a fluid and dynamic, possibly changing number, you said at the start of this that all of these numbers are fluid and dynamic and changing. So I'm wondering why this number specifically. Is the state tracking it? Does the state have projections on this? Is it not being tracked?
Well, Trevor, all you have to do is use the formula that Kim just gave you in the previous answer. So that number can be very different if it's 0.5 of the infected individuals or it's 3% of the infected individuals. We expect it could be 1,000 people in the state of South Dakota, but we don't know. And it all depends on how an individual's body will react to the virus. And if a person that is vulnerable, if they have health conditions, and if they stay home by themselves and don't expose themselves to anybody else, they may very well get through this whole situation without contracting the virus or putting their health at risk. But if people don't take personal responsibility for their health and those around them, if they don't follow our recommendations, we just can't possibly predict what the ramifications of that would be. And that's why, you've heard me say over and over again, Trevor, that I'm going to be as honest with you as possible. I'm going to give you the facts and give the people of South Dakota the facts, and it is up to each and every one of them to personally take this on as a challenge to how they are going to change their way of life to protect their communities. That is really the plan that I am asking all of you to get on board with and to make sure you're doing, because we have vulnerable people that need to stay home. Our elderly population are people that have health conditions already that compromises them. but we need people to stay home that don't, that are just carriers as well, that they need to do exactly like Dr. Settle recommended, is plan out their activities, make sure that they're not out exposing other people, too often, and that they're really being responsible. And that's why that death number is very hard to predict, hard to know. We could be speculating, and we've long said we're going to focus on facts and the data and the science to make decisions. And this is a plan that we've all decided is one we can plan for and put into place for South Dakota.
Okay, a question somewhat related then. When you talk about the necessity of having sometime at our mid-June peak 5,000 hospital beds and 1,300 ventilators, is that number, where in the range of 30% to 70% infection are those ventilator and hospital bed numbers?
So when we do look at the impact of individuals who are infected with COVID-19, really what we're looking at is those infections occur on a range. So you have some individuals who will have asymptomatic infection, and most of those individuals, as we've talked about before, will have very mild symptoms. And unfortunately, we do have certain percentage that will have more severe outcomes that do require hospitalization, that do require that advanced level of care that does include the need to be ventilated. The overall focus is really around the numbers depend a lot on whether or not we are able to do a large amount of testing. So if we are able to test all individuals who we suspect may have COVID-19 infection, that mortality rate due to COVID-19 will be much smaller. It will be closer to 0.5%. If we are unable to test all individuals, that number will look bigger. That number will look closer to around that 3%, as we've seen coming out of some of the studies from China and Italy and other places. And it is important to keep in mind that the major impactors on what does lead to somebody experiencing the worst, most severe outcomes and potentially dying from COVID-19, first and foremost is age. If you look at some of the information out there, it is a very linear association with the older age a person is, the greater the likelihood of them dying once they become infected with COVID-19. So those are important factors to keep in mind, and why it is very difficult to just give you a one particular number on this, because it does involve many factors.
And I think it's one of the reasons why we've been so focused on making sure that we're building on our testing capabilities. We are excited to hear that we'll be getting the Abbott ID tests coming, that they will be delivered to us, but also we need the supplies to go with it so that we can test more individuals and build up that capacity so we can identify folks who are positive quicker and isolate them and make sure we're protecting that vulnerable population. Further questions?
Delivered to us, but also we need the supplies to go with so that we can test more individuals.
So the question was, will we see this novel coronavirus, the COVID-19 virus, becoming more of typical, either showing seasonality as we see with influenza, or maybe more like our other human coronaviruses that circulate at different points throughout the year, typically our winter season? And if I had a crystal ball, I would be able to fully answer that question. But I think the important thing to note is that this is not going away anytime soon. Some of the differences that we have seen between some of the other novel coronaviruses that have emerged, and that would have been in 2003 with the SARS coronavirus and 2012 with the MERS coronavirus. Those had very short lives in terms of, they were very impactful. We did see a large number of people who developed illness and a large number of people who died from those illnesses, but they did not reach the level of being considered a pandemic virus as we have with COVID-19. So the idea of whether this will be more common and whether it will circulate kind of more routinely, more seasonally, as we see with other viruses, is a very good question, and one that we hope to know as we go through time, but is not one that we can really estimate at this point.
I was wondering if Dr. Archer would speak a little bit to what you're telling your patients today when they call in for questions on how they're feeling. And maybe all of you could speak to this a little bit about what is your message to individuals in your communities?
Thank you. So we have a number of options for patients, starting with online and also a call nurse triage line. From there, we have one of our urgent care centers actually in Rapid City dedicated as a COVID assessment center. All of our Hills locations also have the capability of seeing patients and testing as well. The primary message to patients is that we will treat you based on your symptoms, and that the test itself is relevant to us in terms of tracking the disease and the spread, but is not immediately relevant to your treatment. There is, again, as Dr. Basil pointed out, we have no specific treatment. There is no specific vaccination at this time. Our treatment is specific to the individual, and really irregardless of whether the test is done or not, or irregardless of whether the test is positive or not.
Yeah, Dr. Basil with Avera. Similarly, we are first and foremost, if you think you have symptoms that may be COVID related, we're telling you to stay home and give us a call. You can either call your primary physician or our central call number so that we can assess you. And similarly, the test can be helpful, especially in hospitalized patients, but we base our treatment based off of the symptoms and what you have. Another piece that we're really doing is life has to go on from a standpoint of patient care. So we still have babies being born. We still need to get babies vaccinated. And so another thing that we've really done is we've had a wholesale change in just a matter of a couple of weeks away from in-person visits to telemedicine visits. And so my wife is a pulmonary and critical care physician. And yesterday when she was in clinic, she saw about 80% of her usual volume in clinic. Each and every one of those was via telemedicine. In a matter of 2 weeks, we were able to turn that over. Now, obviously, we still need to bring those babies in to get their shots and stuff, but we're, having discussions, even drive-by shots and stuff like that. I mean, this is a different world we live in, but the innovation of our health partners and all of us are meeting that challenge.
Thank you. Yeah, very similar stories. I think the ability to flip on a dime to move to online healthcare has been phenomenal. I do think it's one of those lasting changes. I think the world will be a different place after this pandemic. And I think that will be one of those lasting changes that now that our physicians and our patients are used to doing more of that online medicine, we'll be doing much more of that. So we've seen incredible numbers of online visits as well. I think the other thing that we're telling our patients is that we're here for you. I mean, we are here to take care of you, and we are looking at different options for treatments. So we have many clinical trials open. We are making sure we're getting some of the medications that are options for patients. We've been using those on inpatients that we've had. So we want to make sure that we're offering everything that any other patient would receive on either coast. So we're making sure that we have those available. So if you should become ill, that we can at least try those medications.
Further questions?
This is Morgan from the Rapid City Journal.
Yes, Morgan.
Could you speak a little to the National Guard building hospitals? Would those be like different freestanding structures on their own and kind of temporary, or would they go into some of these empty buildings right now, like schools and that kind of thing?
Yes, I have utilized our National Guard resources to set up hospitals that will help build in this type of capacity. They are currently planning in Sioux Falls and Rapid City 100-bed hospitals that will complement and will work with this plan. They, as a part of their process, and they are the experts on this, they do this every day, will identify appropriate facilities for them to use that they will tap into and set up full, complete hospitals that they will have the ability to staff as well, which is going to be a help to our healthcare systems who will have staffing things to mitigate to make sure that they're able to meet the need that will be asked of them. So that planning is undergoing. Our National Guard is on the task and they will accomplish it and do an outstanding job like they always do.
Are you able to like describe kind of what these structures are expected to be? Like, would people be housed in empty schools and empty civic centers? That kind of thing. Do we know that at this point?
They will find facilities that are appropriate for a hospital type setting. They will not be MASH hospitals. I can ask Kim to give a few more details as she knows, but again, the National Guard does this. This is part of their normal operations that they have the skills and the talent to do, and they will be identifying the facilities and structure and completely setting up the kind of healthcare facility that we will need.
Thanks, Governor. The only thing I guess I would add is that we're partnering with the National Guard and our state supply cache. We have what we refer to as hospital in a box. It's the equipment needed to set up, an off-site hospital. But the National Guard will actually be doing the site assessment, as the governor indicated, in those two communities, and knowing what kind of equipment they will have available to them for this. They'll make the best decision about how to set that up, both in Rapid City and Sioux Falls.
And it'll be in cooperation of looking at what resources we have at the other healthcare systems there, because we will need a certain number of ICU beds. We may need to convert at some of our healthcare facilities other beds to ICU beds, utilize and keep separate COVID positive 19 patients from other traditional patients and have separate facilities for them. And that's all the analysis that our systems are participating in with our Department of Health and with the National Guard. Yes, we're going to quit with questions. If you have further questions, you can follow up with Maggie in my office, but let's go back and give each of our physicians and healthcare systems an opportunity to have a final word for the public. Let's start with Dr. Archer.
Yeah, again, I'd like to thank our community for stepping up, both in terms of volunteerism. We have donations coming in. We have folks volunteering to help us manufacture and recycle equipment. The outpouring of support has been heartwarming, actually. And I think our plea also, in keeping, with what the governor said earlier, is to maintain that social distancing. Stay home. Limit your time out, limit your time exposed in groups, and practice hand washing. Know that we are in contact with on a daily basis with our elected officials and with this group here as well to get the best information that we can to keep you informed and make decisions that's useful in order to prevent the spread of the virus.
Yeah, to close, I would like to thank again the Governor's Secretary, Dr. Clayton, our other health partners. When we look at these numbers, they can be really daunting. And then I look at the people that are coming forward, the stories that you're hearing. This will change us, but it's bringing us together. At the same time that we're being physically distanced, we're coming together socially, to your point. And we will come out of this stronger. The innovation that we're coming through this, we can get through it. Just stay home and be safe.
That's fantastic words. The only other thing I would add is that these are very stressful times, and each individual on any given day is experiencing some level of stress or anxiety that you might not be aware of. And I think it's an opportunity for all of us to show a little grace for each other, and kind of assume good intentions, assume that everyone is doing the best they can, and really be there to help out and help each other out, because it will get more stressful, and everyone is having their own levels of anxiety, and we can get through it if we show grace to each other and we're good to each other.
I really want to hug everybody right now. No, everybody who knows me knows I'm kind of a hugger, but so here's my concern, is that by looking at the charts that we've shown you, by telling you the plan, and by showing you the time frame for how long we will have to maintain the kind of activities that we have the last couple of weeks, I'm concerned that people will think they can't do it. And I want to offer just a word of encouragement to the people of South Dakota. I have traveled this country. I have traveled the world. I have worked for you, and you know me, and I know you because I grew up here, I was born here, and I'm still here. We are tougher than anybody else I've ever met before. You don't just happen to live in South Dakota. You live here on purpose, and you do it because you're resilient and because you know how to work hard to see a job and get it done. And while we have an incredible challenge ahead of us the next few months, I have all the faith in the world in the people of our state. I know we can do this, that we can rely on each other to be responsible and to take care of each other and to make sure that we're diligent about being responsible. So thank you all so much for the blessing of being with you and working with you, and all of you at the table for investing so much of your time and energy and heart into this. This is something that, again, I want to remind you is dynamic and fluid as we learn more about the virus, as it spreads. Plans may adjust, but this is the facts as we know it today. We have a plan we know we can use to protect the people of South Dakota, and I have all the faith in the world that we can accomplish it together. So go out and be an encouragement to someone today, and thank you all, and follow up with me in my office if you have any questions going forward. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day.